Hi again. John Wesley Bready, this Freedom Whence, page 309, in the chapter Christendom, Whither Bound. He's been talking about the impact of the evangelicals in Britain, the immense impact, perhaps even revolutionary in the spiritual sense, and maybe the reason that Britain and America never underwent the internal revolutions that Europe did during this very period of evangelicalism's greatest influence in both Britain and North America. He goes on about the influence of George Whitefield. Only against the backgrounds of colonial Puritanism can the amazing impact of George Whitefield on America be fairly gauged. True, the 13 weeks of his first American sojourn in 1738, though confined to Georgia, were successful. But it was not till his second colonial tour, October 1739 till January 1741, when he came into contact with Pennsylvania and New England, that he began really to stir the New World. And how congenial he found the promised land of the Pilgrim Fathers, his own words make clear. Quote, "On many counts it certainly exceeds all other provinces in America, and for the establishment of religion all other parts of the world. Every 5 miles, or perhaps less, that you have a meeting house. I like New England exceedingly well." End of quote. Admittedly, too, it was in Georgia, despite the protestations of Benjamin Franklin, that Whitefield founded his famous Bethesda orphanage, which for so many years was to offer a home for from 80 to 140 destitute or abandoned children. That orphanage, however, was located in Georgia because Georgia was the center of such need. Whatever the shortcomings of the Puritan settlements, they not only educated their children, but they left none of their orphans to suffer the pangs of starvation and nakedness. The neighborliness of the Puritan parishes obviated such inhumanity. Nevertheless, all was not well with the Puritan commonwealths when Whitefield began his momentous mission. The influence of that great but austere theologian, Jonathan Edwards, radiating from Northampton, Massachusetts, was still considerable, but already reaction was at work. The relentless predestinarianism of the man, who could write "sinners in the hands of an angry God," were certain to alienate many sensitive souls, while those who concluded they were damned concluded with equal consistency that they might as well earn their damnation by indulging the pleasures of sin while yet opportunity remained. The gigantic physical exertions, moreover, of the initial Pilgrim Fathers now no longer were equally imperative. Leisure was less scant, and not a few of the characteristic vices of Old England had become all too apparent in New England. Drunkenness was on the increase. Cockfighting was becoming popular. Gambling in some quarters approached an obsession. Material standards of success were undermining the earlier fraternalism, and the tares of monetary cupidity were choking the wheat of spiritual attainment. The protracted impact of Whitefield on America was the very thing needful to save colonial Puritanism from its legalism, its rigidity, its mounting individualism, and its increasing danger of self-righteousness. His gracious adaptability, his marvelous imagery, and his spontaneous, overflowing eloquence went straight to the heart of the New World. The man whose pulpit appeal could extract from the then hostile Franklin, that is Benjamin Franklin, all the copper, silver, and gold in his pockets, was no ordinary preacher, no common mortal. Whitefield was not a little influenced by what was best in New England, and some aspects of Edwards' teaching left a permanent stamp on him. But he brought to the dominant religious outlook in America a complementary message which was invaluable. His enthusiasm and compassion, his universal charity and selflessness were as gentle, fructifying showers on parched soil. His central emphasis was not the majesty, but the love of God. He proclaimed not divine wrath, judgment, and retribution, but divine mercy and patience, divine pardon and grace. It is poignant that from Northampton, where so many souls were seared and scorched by the threatened fires of judgment, Whitefield reports, quote, "I found my heart drawn out to talk of scarce anything besides the consolations and privileges of the saints, and the plentiful effusion of the Spirit upon believers." End of quote. Whitefield's theology was cast in the mold of mild Calvinism, but his ministry always was tender, healing, inspiring. In pressing the logic of theory, he knew where to stop, and if to the end his preaching implied the decrees, that is, the decrees of Calvinism, that implication was merely an attempt to vindicate the omniscience of God. It was his friend John Wesley, the unflinching advocate of free will, whom he desired to preach his funeral sermon in his great tabernacle in London. To him, the conscious unity of heart and spirit superseded all disagreements on doctrine, and he did have quite a few disagreements with Wesley on doctrine. Not yet has the historical importance of Whitefield's labors been duly appreciated. In Scotland, with its Calvinistic backgrounds, his influence was immense. In America, the land of his special devotion, it was strategic. Sir James Stephen, in his Essays in Ecclesiastical Biography, says, quote, "If ever philanthropy burned in the human heart with a pure and intense flame, embracing the whole family of man in the spirit of universal charity, it was in the heart of George Whitefield. He loved the world that hated him. He had no preferences but in favor of the ignorant, the miserable, and the poor." End of quote. Again, the free-thinking Benjamin Franklin, who at first was annoyed with Whitefield because he could not persuade him to plant his orphanage in Philadelphia, finally said of him, quote, "I knew him intimately upwards of 30 years. His integrity, disinterestedness, and indefatigable zeal in prosecuting every good work I have never seen equaled, and shall never see excelled." End of quote. Whitefield not only awakened the existing churches in America to a new enthusiasm, a new vision, and a new tolerance, his missions being instrumental in establishing hundreds of new congregations within half a dozen communions, diffused a new evangelical unity, while thousands of those who, in religious things, could not previously discern between their right hand and their left, began to hunger and thirst after righteousness, and to seek diligently the things of the kingdom of heaven. Even provincial governors embraced him in deep emotion as he departed out of their midst. Franklin, to satisfy his curiosity, made a mathematical calculation of the size of the Philadelphia multitude hanging on Whitefield's words, and to his amazement determined that 35,000 souls were at one time listening to the evangelist's message. The financing of Whitefield's orphanage was itself, in those days of sparse money, no slight undertaking. Yet this was but one of many good works for which Whitefield raised such voluntary collections as never before had been heard on American soil. Next time, Whitefield's contributions to education in America. Put in a link to Jonathan Edwards. The gospel is not about us.